It happened on a Saturday evening I'll never forget. I was in my backyard flipping burgers on the grill. My cousins were setting up the giant inflatable movie screen for the kids, and music was thumping from the Bluetooth speakers we'd carefully hidden among the patio plants. American flags flapped lightly on the fence posts. Red Solo cups were stacked on the drinks table. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. A loud screeching of tires tore through the calm suburban air. Everyone stopped. Even the kids froze mid-splash in the inflatable pool. I looked up, and that's when I saw them. 3 black SUVs pulled up aggressively in front of my ranch-style home. The lead car had an official-looking HOA enforcement magnet slapped on the door, though I already knew no such department existed. They weren't cops, but they wanted you to think they were. Out stepped Karen, the blonde-haired HOA president in her signature red pantsuit, holding a clipboard like it was a loaded weapon. Behind her came Mr. White. Yes, that's actually his name. He wore mirrored aviators and carried a bullhorn. And lastly, the most feared of all, Randy, the HOA's security liaison, a man with the demeanor of an ex-military drill sergeant who took the term volunteer enforcement way too seriously. Karen marched up my driveway with purpose. "Turn that music off immediately," she barked, her voice slicing through the backyard joy like a buzzsaw. I walked up to meet them at the gate, confused, irritated, but still trying to stay polite. "This is my property," I said calmly. "You guys have no right to be here." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Actually, we do, Mr. Johnson. You're within HOA zoning lines. And you're in violation of noise ordinances, safety regulations, and unauthorized gatherings exceeding 20 people." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're making that up," I said. "My property isn't even part of the HOA." That's when Randy shoved past me, literally pushed me aside. He stomped into my yard, pointing to the bouncy castle. "This is a liability. You got a permit for this." The kids began to cry. My friends looked on in shock. I turned to grab my phone and dial the sheriff's department, but Mr. White was already shouting into his bullhorn like he was commanding a riot squad. "Disperse immediately. This is a violation of Community Ordinance 7.3. That was it. My brother Mark, former Army, now a firefighter, stepped up and got in Randy's face. "Touch him again," Mark growled, "and you're going to meet the real consequences." The tension was so thick you could slice it with a grill spatula still dangling from my hand. But just as I thought it couldn't get worse, Karen reached into her folder and held up a cease and desist letter with my name already printed on it. "You have exactly 30 minutes to shut this party down," she snapped, "or we will escalate this to county code enforcement. We have friend there." The worst part? They weren't bluffing. And that's when I saw a drone hovering overhead. I didn't know who sent it, but it was clearly filming everything. Was this part of their intimidation tactics? Were they recording my guests? Was this going to turn into something bigger than just HOA harassment? That's when I realized something deep and ugly was going on behind the scenes of our friendly neighborhood. And they didn't want me to find out. Right after I spotted the drone, everything shifted. I stepped back, shielding my eyes from the glare of the late summer sun, and stared up at the small buzzing object in the sky. It hovered right above my backyard, angled directly at the party scene. It wasn't one of ours. Nobody I invited had brought one. That meant only one thing. "They're filming us?" I asked, turning toward Karen. She didn't answer. But Mr. White gave a smug smirk and tapped the side of his aviator sunglasses. "Just a little precaution," he said, "for the safety of the community. Or to create fake evidence," I shot back. At that point, my Uncle Bob, who'd been a defense attorney for 25 years, stepped in. "You do realize this is an invasion of privacy, right?" he said loudly. "This is private property. That drone could be breaking FAA rules." Karen's eyes flicked to the drone, and for the first time that day, her fake confidence cracked. She glanced nervously at Randy. "I'll handle this," Randy barked, pulling out a remote control. He was flying the drone. "You brought surveillance equipment to intimidate me at my house?" I asked. "Just because I refused to join your ridiculous HOA. You don't understand what's at stake," Karen snapped. That line was different. "What is at stake, Karen?" She opened her mouth to speak, but caught herself. Instead, she turned to Randy and muttered, "Get it down. Now." The drone lowered and zipped back toward the front of the house. A few neighbors had started to gather across the street, drawn by the shouting. One even began filming with their phone. It wasn't just a neighborhood barbecue anymore. It was turning into a spectacle. I took a deep breath and turned to address my guests, most of whom looked somewhere between horrified and ready to riot. "Guys," I said, raising my voice so they could hear over the murmurs, "this is exactly why I never joined the HOA. This is the kind of bullying they do. This is what they're trying to cover up." Karen stepped in quickly. "That's a lie. This man has been non-compliant since the day he moved here. He refuses to follow community rules." "My home," I said. "My rules." But that moment had planted a seed of curiosity in the guests. And among them was Emily Patterson, a local journalist and longtime friend of my sister. She came forward, phone in hand, and quietly whispered, "Are you okay if I record everything now? I know something's off here." I nodded. "Do it." Emily panned her camera from Karen's trembling lips to the growing group of HOA board members, now fanning out across my lawn like they own it. One of them, a man named Dave in khakis and a blue golf shirt, was speaking urgently into his Bluetooth earpiece. He kept glancing at a black folder under his arm. That's when Emily leaned in again. "I recognize that folder. That's the same type used at town planning meetings." Town planning? Why would he bring that to a backyard party? Suddenly, this wasn't about noise, burgers, or even the HOA itself. Something bigger was going on. But just before I could walk over to confront Dave about the folder, I heard a loud pop. The inflatable movie screen collapsed. One of the kids screamed. At first, I thought it was just an accident. But then I saw Karen's heel marks by the air pump hose, like she'd deliberately stepped on it. "You did that on purpose," my niece shouted. Karen gasped like she'd been slapped. That's an outrageous accusation from a child. But it was too late. People had seen it. Phones were out. Emily had captured the whole thing. "All right, enough," I shouted. "Everyone back off my property. Now." Randy stepped forward, red in the face. "You're going to regret this." But before he could finish, blue lights flashed at the end of the street. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up slowly. The party hushed. The deputy stepped out. Young, calm, and clearly used to HOA drama. "Got a noise complaint," he said, scanning the tense crowd. "But judging by what I'm seeing, I think there's more going on here." Karen tried to rush forward. "Officer, I'm the HOA president, and this man is running an illegal gathering." But before she could continue, the deputy held up a hand. "Let's see some IDs from everyone involved in this enforcement action." Karen paused. Randy flinched. Dave clutched that folder tighter. I stepped up next to the deputy. "They're not law enforcement," I said. "They're trespassing. They used a drone to spy on my guests. One of them sabotaged the party equipment. This is harassment." Emily stepped forward too. "I have it all on video," she added. The deputy looked from me to Karen. "Well, then I think it's time we sorted this out properly." But before anything else could be said, Dave took off running. With the folder. We all froze as Dave bolted down the sidewalk, that black folder clutched tight under his arm like it was national treasure. The sheriff's deputy shouted, "Hey, stop right there," and gave chase immediately, calling for backup on his radio. Karen's face went white. Mr. White took a nervous step back. Randy clenched his fists and looked like he was debating whether to run too. Everyone at the party stood still, processing what just happened. It was like something out of a movie. One second we were grilling hot dogs. The next, a rogue HOA member was sprinting down the street like he'd just stolen classified documents. I turned to Emily. "Did you get all that?" She nodded, already backing up her footage to the cloud. The deputy returned 20 minutes later with Dave in cuffs and the folder in hand. He had caught him hiding near a neighbor's shed, trying to burn the documents with a lighter. Thankfully, nothing was destroyed. That's when things got really weird. The deputy sat Karen, Randy, and Mr. White down at a picnic table and began reviewing the contents of the folder, flipping through page after page of maps, notes, emails, and printed out text threads. He called me over a few minutes later. "Mr. Johnson," he said quietly, "you might want to see this." I leaned over, and what I saw chilled me to my bones. There were aerial photos of our street, but not recent ones. They were planning documents from years ago, before most of us moved in. One page was a development blueprint that showed a cul-de-sac, homes, and HOA structures. But the lot where my house stood? It was labeled Phase 2, clubhouse and pool site. What does this mean?" I asked. The deputy shrugged. "Looks like this land wasn't supposed to be sold to an individual. Your house was built before the HOA officially filed final zoning papers. You're sitting on land they wanted for expansion." My heart dropped. Suddenly, all the harassment made sense. The fake noise complaints, the bogus citations, the uninvited inspections, and now the disruption of my party. It wasn't just because I refused to join the HOA. They were trying to drive me out. Karen had lied for years. They all had. And they were willing to use intimidation, humiliation, and even destruction of private property to make sure I'd leave and give up the land. But I wasn't going anywhere. I turned to Karen. "So that's what this was all about, huh? Not about rules or noise. It's about this land. You tried to run me out so you could build your clubhouse." Karen scoffed. "You don't understand how this works. That land was promised to us. You bought it because of a clerical error. You shouldn't even be here." "And yet I am," I said. Emily stepped in, phone still recording. "Care to repeat that for the press?" Karen tried to bat the phone away, but the deputy stepped between them. "Keep your hands to yourself, ma'am." It was now completely out in the open. The guests were furious. Some were yelling. A few HOA sympathizers quietly slipped away. Kids were pulled close by their parents, and the mood turned from disbelief to raw anger. And me? I wasn't the same. I'd faced pressure from the HOA for 2 years. What I didn't know was that it was all part of a long-term scheme, a secret project to expand their power using shady tactics, misinformation, and fake authority. And now, their secret was exposed. And I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I had become their worst nightmare. But just as things started to calm down, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, "We warned you once. Back off or your family won't be safe." The message on my phone burned into my brain like a brand. "We warned you once. Back off or your family won't be safe." I stared at the screen, my hands going cold. At first I thought it might have been a prank, or maybe some HOA hothead blowing off steam. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't random. This was calculated. It didn't take long for my wife, Allison, to walk up next to me. She saw my expression and immediately asked, "What's wrong?" I didn't want to scare her, especially in front of the guests and kids still milling around the yard. So I just said quietly, "I need to show you something inside." Once we stepped into the kitchen, I showed her the message. Her face paled, and she slowly lowered herself into one of the bar stools. "Do you think it's real?" she whispered. "I do," I said. "And I think they're watching us." Just as I said it, the front doorbell rang. I froze. I checked the door camera feed on my phone. No one was there. But taped to the doorframe, fluttering slightly in the breeze, was a plain, white envelope. No address. No name. I cautiously stepped outside and grabbed it. Inside the envelope was a single piece of paper. No words. Just a printed picture. A photo of Allison's car, parked in front of her work office. The timestamp was from that same morning. They had followed her. I didn't hesitate. I called the sheriff back. He was still down the street talking to neighbors and taking statements about the HOA incident. When he saw the photo, his mood shifted fast. "This is a different level," he said. "You've crossed into something more than just a neighborhood beef. This might qualify as organized harassment, possibly criminal intimidation." He made a call to request extra patrols around my house. Meanwhile, I gathered every phone and camera recording from my party guests. Emily helped compile all the footage into a single timeline. Karen stomping the bouncy castle hose, Randy pushing me, the drone overhead, Dave running with the folder, and the threatening folder contents. The story was already starting to gain traction online. Emily uploaded a teaser on her journalist blog and social pages titled, HOA Nightmare. The day a suburban block party turned into a power grab. Within hours, it was being reshared in local groups. The comment section exploded. One comment in particular stood out. This happened to my dad 5 years ago in the same town. They bullied him into selling. Wish we'd fought back. That's when it hit me. We weren't just victims of one bad HOA. This might be part of something bigger. A network. A pattern. And maybe that's why they were trying so hard to scare me. I decided I wasn't going to wait around for them to make the next move.
If you've ever felt abandoned, unheard, or betrayed by someone who should have protected you, leave a comment. You are not alone. Please like, subscribe, and share this story so it reaches someone who needs to hear it today.
The next morning, I went to City Hall. With Emily by my side and a copy of the original land use blueprint from the folder, I demanded a meeting with the zoning department. It took some time, but eventually we got a staffer who agreed to pull up old records. Sure enough, my land had been mislabeled in a clerical error 15 years ago. The HOA had petitioned to reclaim the land for times, and failed each time. They'd known all along they couldn't take it legally, so they tried to take it through pressure, lies, and fear. And now that I had proof, they were scared. But I wasn't ready for what came next. When I returned home that afternoon, I found the side gate of my backyard open. Wide open. Allison was inside with the kids, but she hadn't heard anything. I checked the backyard and found muddy boot prints by the shed. Someone had been inside my property again. And spray painted across the back wall of my garage, in thick red paint, were 3 words. You're next, traitor. I stared at the words, heart pounding. That night, we installed motion detectors and cameras on every corner of the property. My brother Mark stayed over, armed. I wasn't going to let my family be hurt because I uncovered their scheme. But even as we secured the house and handed more evidence to the sheriff, I felt something worse brewing beneath it all. If the HOA Cabals had gone this far for land, what were they truly hiding? Because I had a feeling that the folder didn't contain everything. And I was right. 3 days later, a former HOA board member who'd mysteriously resigned 6 months ago contacted me anonymously. His text said, "Meet me at the old water tower after sunset. Come alone. I have something that will bury them." I didn't tell Allison where I was going. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I couldn't stand the look on her face if she knew I was walking into a trap or something close to it. All I told her was, I need to check on something. Mark's here. Lock the doors behind me. Then I left. The water tower was an old rusting skeleton at the edge of our neighborhood, abandoned for years after the city upgraded its infrastructure. It sat behind a line of trees just off a forgotten access road. Kids used to sneak there to drink and scare each other. But tonight, it looked like a shadow out of a horror film, looming and silent under the blood-orange sky. I parked my truck down the road and approached on foot. I had my flashlight in one hand and pepper spray in the other, just in case. "Hello." I called out. "It's just me." No answer at first. Then movement. A figure stepped out from behind the tower. He was older, maybe mid-60s. Graying hair, weathered face, and hands that trembled just enough to notice. He wore a dusty windbreaker and a nervous expression. "You Johnson?" he asked quietly. "Yeah. You the one who texted?" He nodded. "Name's Carl. Used to be the HOA treasurer." "Used to be?" I squinted. "You were the one who resigned after that medical leave, right?" Carl gave a bitter laugh. Medical leave was their excuse. I quit when I realized they were laundering money through neighborhood development projects. Fake maintenance jobs. Inflated landscaping invoices. Funneling HOA dues to a slush fund. I froze. "Wait, what?" He pulled out a zippered leather folio and handed it to me. "Here. Every receipt I copied before I left. They thought I deleted the backups, but I saved everything to a flash drive. Look under Phase 2. That's where you come in." I unzipped the folio and flipped through the papers. And sure enough, there were line items for materials never purchased, hours never worked, and contractor names that didn't even exist. Some were dated from years before I ever moved in. They've been trying to take your land to build a community center that would qualify them for federal improvement grants, Carl said. But it's not real. It's a front. The money's already been moving. I stared at him. How much? Carl hesitated. At least 6 figures. Maybe more. If you expose this, they're done. That's when headlights flared in the distance. A car pulled up behind my truck. We ducked behind the tower. 2 doors opened. A flashlight scanned the area. It was Randy, and beside him, Karen. I could hear her voice, clear and sharp. He was told not to interfere again. If he leaks anything, everything we've worked for crumbles. They were looking for me. Carl put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You can't let them get this folder." I nodded and slipped the documents into my backpack. We stayed hidden as Karen and Randy stomped around, eventually giving up and driving off. But I noticed Randy checking his phone every few minutes. He might have been tracking something. Maybe me. As soon as they were gone, I shook Carl's hand and promised him 2 things. I'd protect his identity. I'd bring everything to the sheriff and the local press. Carl looked tired, but relieved. Be careful, kid. They're desperate now. Desperate people do stupid things. I got home just before midnight. Allison was awake, pacing the kitchen, eyes red. When I walked in, she ran to me and wrapped her arms around my chest. "I thought they got you," she whispered. I told her everything. She was silent for a long time before finally saying, "We need to go public." And we did. Emily helped me write a full report with scanned documents, audio from Carl, video from a party, and the threatening messages. She sent it to a local news affiliate under the title, HOA Mafia, Neighborhood Officials Accused of Extortion, Surveillance, and Financial Fraud. By morning, the story had exploded. Channel 8 ran a full piece during the 6 a.m. news. By 9 a.m., Karen's face was all over Facebook. My inbox was flooded. Local politicians started asking questions. But by noon, something terrible happened. Carl's house caught fire. The fire chief said it started in the back room. Faulty wiring, they claimed. But we knew better. Carl made out alive, but barely. Smoke damage. Hospitalized for burns and shock. He told the sheriff, this was no accident. And I believed him. I was next. Later that same day, my mailbox was ripped off its post. My power went out for 6 hours, sabotage. A rock smashed through our front window with a note taped to it that read, "Stop or you'll regret this." This wasn't a HOA drama anymore. This was war. And I was going to take them down, one by one. But just as I thought I was ready to go fully public with everything, the sheriff's office called me in urgently. Apparently, they found something else in Dave's hidden documents. Something connected to a judge. I arrived at the sheriff's office just after 8 a.m. The deputy who met me at the door didn't waste time with small talk. "We found something big," he said. "You're going to want to see this." I was led to a small conference room where Sheriff Daniels, bald, firm, no nonsense, waited with a stack of papers and a laptop open beside him. Sitting next to him was a man I didn't recognize, a federal investigator with a Department of Justice badge clipped to his blazer. "Mr. Johnson," the sheriff said, "this is Agent Laramie. He's here because this goes beyond county lines now." Agent Laramie gave a small nod. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, sir. And thank you for doing so. What you uncovered isn't just HOA corruption. It's public fraud." He turned the laptop toward me and hit play on a video file. There on the screen was surveillance footage of a quiet courtroom hearing from a year ago. Karen sat on one side. On the other, a man who looked exactly like Dave, minus the fear. Between them sat a judge. The audio wasn't great, but the subtitles helped fill in the blanks. They were discussing the reallocation of land rights, signed under the table using falsified property maps. The judge, whose nameplate read Judge Mark Thalman, quietly approved the documents and then asked a single question. "And my piece?" Karen responded, "Same as last time. 10% into the foundation account." Agent Laramie paused the footage. That's what sealed it. The judge wasn't just turning a blind eye. He was in on it. We already had him under review for unrelated ethics violations, But your case blew the lid off the whole thing. I stared at the screen. So that's why they wanted me gone. The sheriff nodded. They thought you were the last piece of the puzzle. With your land, they'd finalize the expansion plan, cash in on the federal grant, and walk away clean. Until you didn't fold. I leaned forward. What happens now? Agent Laramie gave a grim smile. Arrests. And that same day, they began. The news broke by noon. Channel 8's headline read, "Breaking. Local HOA leaders arrested in federal fraud investigation linked to judge." Karen was picked up at her home, still in her robe. Randy was cornered in a Home Depot parking lot. Dave, they found him trying to cross state lines with burner phones and a suitcase full of cash. The judge tried to plead ignorance, but the recordings, emails, and bank records told the truth. My party video went viral. Over 5 million views in 48 hours. Emily's blog turned into a national spotlight on corrupt HOAs, and dozens of victims from across the country came forward, sharing eerily similar stories of forced buyouts, mistaken zoning, and silent intimidation. But amidst the victory, it wasn't over. We still had damage. Carl remained in the hospital. My family couldn't sleep soundly. Neighbors were divided, some furious at Karen, others embarrassed for not seeing it sooner. Some who had blindly followed the HOA rules now questioned everything. And me? I wasn't the same. I'd started as just a guy trying to host a barbecue without drama. Now, I have a legal team, a media inbox full of interview requests, and a stack of lawsuits on my kitchen table, some filed by others, some filed by me. But the one thing that gave me peace was watching Karen get let out of the courthouse in cuffs, her red blazer replaced by a beige jail-issued jumpsuit. No clipboard, no bullhorn, no smug smirk, just silence. They had tried to intimidate me. They came to disrupt my party like wolves in suits, thinking I'd be easy to push around. But I stood my ground. And now, my land is mine. My family is safe. And the HOA empire crumbled. I looked at the camera during my final interview with the local news. I didn't go looking for a fight, I said. But if you show up on my land with lies, power trips, and threats, just know I'll be the last person you'll ever try to scare.